Thank you so much, Jackie. Jackie, when we asked Jackie to be the chair of the advisory board for the Alliance for Artisan Enterprise, um, we tell her this all the time. She doesn't think she does, but she's like, oh, I met this woman the other day, and I think we should meet her. And she says, if you could come over to 42nd Street and have coffee over here, we can talk about this. So Jackie is a wealth of love for artisans all over the world, and she is really generous. Jackie, thank you with your time and attention to our efforts here. It's so important. Welcome, everyone. I'm so delighted you're here with us today. We have an incredible day in store. We have a lot of really, really interesting presentations that we hope will leave you with better thinking about how we can support the artisan sector, new ideas for how we can do our own work better, meet new friends, meet new contacts, think about what the future holds for this and what we can do together. So I'm delighted to welcome you. As Jackie said, my name is Peggy Clark. I have a lot of hats I wear at Aspen, but this is the one that I love the most. Many years ago, when I was involved with the beginning of the microfinance and small enterprise movement, I was sent to Jordan, and I met this amazing group called the Beni Hamida Rug Weavers, and they were Bedouin women who were living in Purda. They were using a centuries-old technique of stones and sticks to create these rugs. And I had come from the Wall Street. I'd come from the banking sector, and I was at the forefront of taking private sector skills and bringing it to enterprise development in the developing world. And as usual, they would plop me somewhere, and there'd be this random group of women sitting in somewhere, doing something very insignificant, being paid a stipend. But I came upon this Beni Hamida rug weaving project in Jordan, which was incredible. It was incredible. There were hundreds and hundreds of women. It was a viable business. Queen Noor ended up taking on as patronage, and now Queen Rania has. And that's an interesting story you'll hear more about today. But you know how it is when sometimes life circles back on itself and you find yourself meeting the person in high school that you wanted to have that conversation or whatever. And so happily, someone said, what you should really have on this panel on waging peace is Jordan River Foundation. I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. And so two colleagues from Jordan River Foundation are here with us today, and they run the Beni Hamida Rug Weaving Project, which is really amazing. But what was sort of imprinted on my mind was this image of these hundreds and hundreds of women making these extraordinary products. And the challenge was, how do you make that into a viable business? How do you do that well and in a way that respects the cultural integrity and the economic hopes of all of those women? So that was about 35 years ago. So I think it's probably not an exception to say that everyone in this room has been touched by meeting an artisan and by being involved in an artisan enterprise in some way, either by something that you've bought, something that you've seen, a place you've traveled. And I think it's safe to say that all of us in this room struggle with, how do we support that? How do we support that? That is where, it's the second largest employer after agriculture, but how do we support it? It is not easy. Jackie mentioned some of the things. So today, we're going to get some answers to that question. And it's my firm belief that together we can answer that question, and we can unlock new resources for this sector, we can build knowledge bases, we can support each other, and we can in fact bring viable livelihoods to many people all over the world. So this is actually our fourth Alliance meeting, and it's hard to believe because we are still in major startup mode. It's this tiny little mighty project. But we decided this year to pick the theme, Handmade is Human. Handmade is human. So I want to start us thinking about, what does that really mean? What does that mean, handmade is human? And from my own perspective, I think what we mean by that is handmade expresses our deepest sense of humanity, sort of our best selves, that which connects to our identity, who we are, what we believe in. There's something very meaningful and authentic about it. And so I invite you today to just keep that mantra in your mind. Handmade, what does that mean to invest in our best selves, in our humanity, as we go through the day and we hear from really magnificent presenters? But I thought that I would start close to home with this question. All right, this is a very funny picture. But this dog-eared thing that I'm holding up in front of me is one of my favorite things ever. And this is a quilt that my mother made for me. And my mother has since passed away, but every time I snuggle under it, I remember that it was a very young woman who was born in a very small town called Farmington, Missouri, in the Midwest of the United States. Lived through the Depression, was the 8th child in a family of 8. Father owned the grocery store. And quilting is a big part of what people in rural America do. And it's passed down from generations and generations and generations. And at a certain point in my mom's life, she decided that she was going to make each of her daughters, of which she had 4, a quilt made from all of our old clothes when we were little girls. So every little scrap of this is a little dress I wore, I remember when I broke my arm, we had to buy these really big shirts, and I remember we used to have to take home ec in class, and one of those is a skirt. We had to make a dirndl skirt, and so the brown one is that. And this is the beauty of handmade to me. And what I feel when I snuggle under this blanket is the time that she put into it, the love that she put into it, the fact that she got the idea to make this quilt at all, the fact that for her, quilting was something that her mother did and her mother's mother did and her mother's mother did for years and years. And it's really looking pretty ratty, but I plan to, take it with me to, to my grave, because it really is one of the most meaningful things I have. And so I'd like to propose that we think about how we unlock that meaning in the work that all of you do in this room and translate it into real power. How do we really unlock the power of the artisan sector and of handmade? As we've said, it's a $32 billion industry. It's probably bigger than this. This is what the latest statistics have showed us. It's the 2nd largest employer in the developing world. What does handmade look like in the world? We all live it in this room. We've tried to take over the Aspen Institute with our banners of what is handmade. But we have incredible members in the Alliance for Artisan Enterprise, and this is one of them. If many of you know her, this is Rangina. She runs Kandahar Treasures. It's in perhaps one of the hardest places to live on this earth. It is in Kandahar region of Afghanistan. It's a Taliban-controlled area. But somehow, Rangina has managed to create this remarkable business, Kandahar Treasure, that is building on this. Nowhere else in the world is there a particular type of embroidery, which name I can't pronounce, but it's very, very fine and very special. And she has created a business that supports 400 women all over the world. This is what handmade looks like in one part of the world. This is Doma Kayap. We call him DK because we can't really pronounce his name. He's from Tibet. He couldn't travel here to be with us today because he couldn't get a passport. Tibetans are living under rule in China and are not able to travel. But his family sold their herd of 70 yaks in order for him to create this business. And DK, and you'll hear a video from him a little bit later today, believes that Tibetans need to have their own economic independence. And in fact, it turns out that Handmade is Human in the Tibetan communities is a very revolutionary act, because Tibetans would rather buy felt hats and scarves from Tibetans, but it's very difficult in the context of Chinese rule for them to get access to credit, to access to any business supports at all. And so we have the honor of working with them. DK is one of the most eloquent spokespeople about Handmade is Human. He's a Buddhist himself, and you'll hear his words today. He wishes he could be with us. The Alliance. What's the Alliance? Some of you, welcome. We are a big tent. This is, many of you, your first Alliance event. We have a number of our members here. Anybody who's a member, you want to raise your hand? Yes, great, wonderful. So we believe we're stronger together. This field is really underrepresented. Since we started, we've now grown to over 128 members in 170 countries, 107 countries in all of the regions of the world. We are mighty, even though people may not know we're there yet. What is handmade? Again, what does it look like in the world? So I want to take you back to another really personal place, which isn't quite as ragged as my quilt from my mom that I showed you. But this beautiful woman is her name is Beatrice, and she's the mother of Nilda. Some of you may know Nilda Calapania of the Center for Traditional Textiles of Peru. Nilda's mother is a weaver. Her mother before her was a weaver. The tradition of weaving in Cusco, Peru is as old as the Incan Empire. And the magnificent weaving that they do connects them back to all of the values and the myths of their people. Nilda herself is a very well-educated, remarkable woman. Many of you have met her. She's an eloquent spokesperson. She's written a number of books. But when she went back to her hometown, there were no economic opportunities for anyone there, and the weaving tradition was being lost. And so she decided to create an enterprise. That enterprise works with over 4,000 artisan entrepreneurs right now. It's not an exaggeration to say that it supports some 25,000 families. And in many cases, it's a very special case because there's tourism in Peru. She has a number of stores, and it's a very vibrant business. But when I met this woman, I didn't know it was Nilda's mother. She can't speak English, but she's the rock of this enterprise that Nilda runs in Cusco, and we are honored to be a part of helping to give her financing and assistance to help her support those 25,000 people in Peru. So the question I want to pose to you right now, and I want us to be really honest about this. I'm always accused of being too Pollyannish and too much of a cheerleader. I actually was a cheerleader at one point in my life. You know, it's like, why are you always so happy? Why are you so optimistic? You know, and frankly, we're in this very difficult moment. You know, I think all of us are sort of reeling from what happened after the election, trying to find our bearing. Why are we here? What are we doing? Is it not frivolous for us to be talking about artisan businesses? Is it frivolous for us to be talking about small efforts to support artisan businesses? Welcome, Ambassador Russell. To take from Kathy Russell's words, some people think about the artisan sector, others who are new to this field, and they think, oh, you know, it's just a bunch of women beating together in a room. Why does that matter? So I want us all to address that really seriously today. How do we talk about what we do? If there is real economic value in that field, what do we need to do to make these businesses survive? If it's the way we talk about it, what are the words we need to use to talk about it? So I'd like to really pose that. But to get back to the theme, Handmade is Human, as we go through the day of thinking about this, I want each of us to think about, is it true that when we're working with the artisans we work with, that it is expressing some of our deepest sense of humanity, our best selves? And if so, how do we support that power? You'll hear from people who are working with refugee women and girls, unaccompanied women and girls, who've been perhaps in the most horrific situations you can imagine, who by creating a scarf that expresses their identity and then earning income from that are able to heal, and then they are able to heal a nation. We have a panel on looking at how the power of handmade helps us to bring peace, and there are many, many examples of that in the world. But I think all of us know intuitively, like I knew with the Beni Hamida project, there's something really powerful here. But our job is to bring that power to a bigger group than the 100 of you that are in this room today. And I'm happy to say we have visitors from Morgan Stanley, from the International Finance Corporation, from State Department and others that are walking this journey with us. But I really believe it's going to take all of us being very honest, very critical, very strategic about how we can tap into the economic power of this sector to improve so many lives. At the Alliance, what we are doing is we're trying to take advantage of the moment that we've talked about, but I want us to just reflect for a minute on what we mean by handmade is human. This is a quote I really love. This is on the wall of the Kennedy Center. I see Eric in the back. I know he loves this. And let me read this quote to you. I'm certain that after the dust of centuries has passed over our cities, we too will be remembered, not for victories or defeats in battle or in politics, but for our contribution to the human spirit. That says a lot. It says a lot about what makes countries powerful. And I'm honored to say that when we had Secretary Kerry at our event for the Alliance for the Artisan Enterprise last year, he said, not only did he say this sector, if it were added together, it would be the fifth largest economy in the world, but he went to an exhibit before and he took a a felt red apple from the Uzbekistan thing. And he stood up at the podium and in the auditorium of the State Department, which he was the first to say, I've been to a lot of economic development conferences, but never one that looked like this. But he held up that apple and he said, what brings health to countries and nations? It's also beauty. It's also beauty and culture. And so he held up that apple. And he went off script. He talked for a very long time. And I think he, in visiting countries in the world and as Secretary of State of the largest power, believes that this is something important for us to look at. So just a little bit about the Alliance. These are some images from some magazines, Vogue, Harper's Bazaar. The market is with us right now, guys. Guess what? People are buying artisan honey. People are buying Rwandan specialty coffee. People want to buy things that express people and place in a respectful and ethical way. This is a hugely growing market. And to Jackie's point, the challenge is, how do we ensure that those increased revenues flow to the people who need it most? I hope we'll get some answers for that today. This is our beautiful image for the Choose Artisan campaign, but I want to leave you all, and maybe we can just start because, it's Friday, it's been a hard couple of weeks. Really just close our eyes for a minute, all of us, and imagine if that group you're working with that has 200 women was working with 2,000 women. And imagine if that little grant that you managed to get from the World Bank or the loan you got from the bank, instead of being $2,000, was $20,000 or $200,000. And so imagine what's the path we need to take together to get there. How do we begin to turn this into a viable economic development piece of the puzzle? So I invite you to come with an open mind to all of our conversations today. And to think about the power of linking the economic power we see in the market, craving these kinds of things, and in what we've heard people say, with that power of handmade. What would that really look like? That would be pretty amazing. And many of you in this room have experienced that in your own lives. So now, without further ado, it's my very, very, very great honor to do something really special. And some of you may not know this who are new to the Alliance, but we found ourselves at this very interesting moment in our birth of being in the right place at the right time. And Secretary Clinton, she was Secretary of State at the time, of course, as you know, has traveled all over the world. And everywhere she goes, she visits women-owned businesses and artisan businesses. And she, in her mind, like many of us, were trying to figure out how could we really crack this nut of creating more viable businesses. And so we have a wonderful partnership with the U.S. Department of State, the Office of Global Women's Issues, which we've had since our inception. We are a public-private partnership. Many of you have heard of those, and we were rated one of the top 10 public-private partnerships in the world. We are very honored to have with us today Ambassador Katherine Russell. I think some of you know her. If you haven't, you are in for a real treat. Ambassador Katherine Russell is the U.S. Ambassador at Large for Global Women's Issues. She's had a long and illustrious career. She's a really remarkable asset for us all. She was Deputy Assistant to the President and Chief of Staff to Dr. Jill Biden. She coordinated the White House's gender-based violence efforts. And then most importantly, with the Alliance, every place she has traveled, she's talked about what all of you are doing and brought forward and brought us into the light as the Alliance for Artisan Enterprise and all of you. She brought us to the Global Entrepreneurship Summit in Kenya, where President Obama was. She brought us to every large economic gathering in the world. The Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Conference had a section on artisans. She invested in what you're going to hear this afternoon, this really interesting value chain toolkit innovation workshop, which is a really innovative way to approach business assistance services for artisan businesses. She's championed and led outreach to all embassies all over the world, and she graciously sits on our advisory board. So I do want to say one thing, which is all of us know this is a big moment of transition in Washington, in this crazy town. And so this is the last time we're going to have Ambassador Russell with us as our partner at the office, at the Department of State. And so we took the liberty, Katherine, of doing just a little bit of a tribute to you, which I want to share with you. These are just a few pictures from the many, many beautiful moments we've had with Ambassador Russell. This is Joy of Gaia Links. This is at the State Department event last year. This is Ambassador Russell with the State Department transformed the State Department into the Alliance for Artisan Enterprise and a home for all of us. Thank you, Ambassador Russell. We're really honored. And then last but not least, we really believe in the power of handmade. And Ambassador Russell, this is a present for you. Maybe you can open it and show everyone. This is from one of our members, Fiber Tibet, and this is the softest cashmere in the world. This is a blanket or a shawl. You can't touch it without knowing it's something very, very, very special. But I wonder if everyone could join me and rise for a moment of standing ovation in recognition. Thank you so much, Kathy. I don't know if you ever really will fully appreciate how much you've helped all of us in this room. Thank you, Ambassador.